Hey everyone, I recently finished 2 novellas, 1 memoir, and 1 audiobook. So I thought we could talk about all of them in one video. I'll leave timestamps in the descriptions and I hope the chapters that YouTube created work as well. Let's go in the order I finished them. The first book I finished was The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. And I really enjoyed the beginning. I was sucked into the story. It's set in 1920s Harlem. We follow Tom, who's a young black musician or hustler more who tries to make money, and he lives alone with his dad and tries to make a better living. We see a lot from his perspective. The first part is told from his perspective alone, how he's going to Flushing to sell a book to some strange person. There's magic involved and he's wary of the person and the magic, and we meet other people he meets there. He's getting sucked into some events and it's really fascinating. We also see how there are 2 policemen following him around and doing some investigation. We see a lot about the police brutality that he has to suffer under them and the reactions, what happens after and what this makes out of him. That part I enjoyed immensely. It was really well written, captivating, and really sucked you in. The second part, the perspective switches to one of the policemen who's not quite on board with what was going on from his partner's side, but is also not doing anything against it. He's open to magic and aware of the magic that is around in the area and interested. So now that we see things from his perspective, I found it less captivating. I found it less interesting. The events evolve. We still see Tom being part of the story. We see the magic that started in the first part continue, but we see it from the outside and from the policeman's perspective. And I don't know, it wasn't as captivating. I really liked it, but yeah, it drifted a little bit away at the end. Still worth reading. The other novella I finished was Mage by Kingfisher. And this is classic fantasy quest. We have 12-year-old Oliver, who's the wizard of this village, which is experiencing a major drought. And the villagers appear at his door and say he has to get the rain. So he needs to go to the mountains to get the rain. And that's basically the story. We follow Oliver as he sets off to find the rain and bring it back. His only companion at the beginning, his familiar, an armadillo that talks, and I enjoyed this. This is a fun story with magic. We see Oliver grow and think about his powers or his knowledge as a wizard. I mean, he's just 12 years old. He doesn't know many spells. He's very inexperienced, but he tries to take the responsibility. He thinks about his life as a wizard so far and his connections with the villagers. He misses his mom. He makes new acquaintances on the way and really has to endure some adventures and overcome hurdles, and I loved it. It was well written, fun to read. It was really fast paced. It's under 200 pages for a novella, quite typical, and it really has interesting characters. If you haven't read T. Kingfisher before, I discovered her a few years ago and fell in love with her writing and her fantasy stories. So I can recommend it. The memoir I read was From Rufio to Zuko by Dante Basco. And I got this without realizing that I know Dante Basco. I didn't put the things together. I have very bad memory when it comes to names, actors as well. Sometimes I don't realize I've seen someone for years in movies and series until I actually notice them and start to remember their name. And this is something that probably happened here as well, because I've come across a lot of the things that he talks about. Of course, I've seen Hook, which is one of his most iconic characters, but I've also seen other things that he talks about, including The Last Airbender, which references Zuko. And I really enjoyed this story. It's a very short memoir. He talks very personal to you, tells you about his life, about his family, about his upbringing. He's giving you raw insights into the parts that he talks about without giving you complete openness about all parts of his life. And I really enjoyed this. This focuses a lot on his acting, his voice acting, but also his poetry and other activism. And I really thought this was very well written in a way that you couldn't stop reading and you really got invested. I actually read it in one sitting. It's just a little over 100 pages, and you get so sucked into his world, into his mind, into his thinking. He gives you a lot of about the experience as being an Asian American actor in Hollywood and his aspirations and dreams and hopes for the future, in parts for Asian Americans in Hollywood, but also for Asian American storytelling. And I enjoyed that. I learned a lot about a person that I didn't know I knew and heard of before, so I don't think that counts. I'm not sure how much you will learn about him as a person from this if you have been a fan for a long time, if you are invested in what he's doing and been following him around for a while. I can't say anything to that. But I really liked the insight that he gave from his perspective on being a working actor or a working person in Hollywood. I think I want to recommend it mostly to people who don't know him, so that you get to see a perspective of someone who grew up as a child actor in a marginalized position in Hollywood. Yeah. The audiobook I finished was The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker. And I must admit, I have been putting off reading this book for ages. I wanted to read it in a physical form. I tend to prefer to read literary fiction in physical form, but this is a very big book and I never had the time, and recently I ran out of something to listen to and I was reminded of the book. So I thought, I'll sample it. And I really liked how George Guidall did the narration. I really enjoyed it. So I downloaded it and it was amazing. It was so worth listening to as well as the story itself. So this plays at the end of the 19th century in New York, and we have two magical, mystical creatures arriving at the city at about the same time for various reasons. One is a golem who is really new and set out from Europe to New York with her master, who wanted to have a wife. Unfortunately, he died on the way. So the golem is masterless, but the way the master wanted the golem makes her work on her own. The golem is a very fascinating character, how she really deals with this desire to obey people and to fulfill other people's desires, because that's part of her being a golem. But she also has these violent tendencies, which are also part golem. And we see her part in New York and the people she meets, the people she interacts with, how she starts to make a living and to get through the day and try to blend in. And we see a lot of her hiding who she is. She can never really tell anyone who she is, and she always has to pretend to be human, which means acting in a way that is not natural for her. So she's going through life hiding who she is. The genie, on the other side, has been in New York for a time, probably, but he has been stuck in a flask for hundreds and hundreds of years. And for some reason, the flask needs repairing, and while doing that, the blacksmith accidentally frees the genie. And there we have basically a similar story to the golems. The genie is starting to make friends and get involved in the area, is trying to adapt, hiding who he is and really not living out his full potential, always being careful in showing his hand. And already that was fascinating, that you see parallel switching between the golem and the genie. You hear about their stories, about their struggles, but I really enjoyed the story once they met. They accidentally meet at one point and they start to become tentative friends, because they notice that they can be more open with each other, that they can be more real. They don't have to hide as much. They can say what's going on with them, and they're not as open as you would wish them to be. And sometimes I wanted things to go faster and to see them end up happy, but it takes a while. And I really enjoyed how the story still kept going in these two different parts of New York. We have the Jewish part and the Syrian part, where both of these characters end up due to their mystical nature, and also how they get discovered and found. What's really fascinating with this book, it has all this magical realism, of course, because we have these magic elements, but we also have a lot of real human stories. We hear a lot about the people whose life they've touched and also met in the past, and the quests and desires that people have in this time, but also what people expect and how things evolve. It's really captivating. It was really hard to put down towards the ends when the adventure gets more adventurous and things get dire and really you feel for people. It's really fascinating. I enjoyed the world created. I enjoyed the characters, the writing, the audiobook narration was super well done. I don't regret listening to it instead of reading it. Probably also because I could listen to it faster than I could read it, meaning that I could find out more about the characters faster. Anyways, as you can see, I had some good reading. I'm quite happy with what I read. I enjoyed the stories, and yeah, I want to know if you have read any of those. Let me know in comments what you think about those stories or if you've heard about them before. Let's talk books, people. Thank you for watching.